Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Dribble Drive podcast. Your hosts, Austin Render, Dalton Shetler with you here, episode 49 of the Dribble Drive podcast. Dalton, happy May. I don't know about you guys up in East Lansing, but the weather's finally starting to turn here, and it's starting to feel less and less like basketball season as we start to move away from it. But how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I think that's the only downside of summer is that basketball isn't played during now, but the grill's starting to warm up. We're out on the golf course. You and I got plans, Austin. This is
Yes.
this is a great time of the year.
I can't wait. We're playing some golf this weekend. Baseball's taking me up to the great Mitten State. So excited for that. But there is basketball going on, but we did promise our guest today that we wouldn't talk about it. He's not he can hear me, but he's not in the room yet. So go Pacers. But we're just gonna, that'll be the only mention of the entire podcast. Dalton, we've got a really exciting episode 50. I'm not going to spoil who it is, but our 50th episode is going to be, you and I, we got done recording it, and we talked on the phone for like 20 minutes afterwards. Like, that was awesome. Like, that was a really cool pod. So it is recorded. It's going to be ready. It's going to air in 2 weeks on May 27th at noon Eastern on the Back Home Network YouTube channel, which is where you can find all of our podcasts live, and then they go to Apple and Spotify in recorded form. But just a really, really cool basketball and just general story that we got to talk about for almost an hour.
I was gonna say I won't spoil it either, but if you love basketball, you love the humanity of basketball and sports, and
Yeah.
you just I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this to some degree with their own families and sports, and I think it's going to be something that's going to touch a lot of people and be a lot of fun to go through.
Look, we promised you fun guests and fun episodes as we go through the summer. We will deliver. I think we delivered with our last podcast with Talia Goodman. Really, I mean, if you haven't listened to that, it's a real deep dive into the transfer portal and who's sitting where, which teams need to improve. Because let's be honest, Dalton, there's still a lot of people out there in the portal and that have not announced where they're going yet. So if there's still, it's still time present. If you want to go back and listen to that episode 48 with Talia Goodman, but episode 49, I think is going to be a good one as well. We're bringing in Wyatt Crosher from the Hoopla Newsletter. Wyatt, good afternoon, sir. Thanks for joining the show. How are you?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here. Nothing can hurt me for about 7 hours at least. So that's all. I'm living in the moment for now.
Wyatt's Twitter handle is still Cavs in 7. He still believes. The fingers crossed. If you're listening to this episode after the fact, maybe you already know how that series turned out. But yeah, we won't belabor the point anymore for Wyatt. We're just good. You do a lot of writing on Big Ten women's basketball, so we figured this is a great way to just kind of take a moment to go back, take a moment to live in the present, take a moment to look in the future, see what's going on. For you, what's the biggest storyline coming out of the 24-25 season in the conference, kind of as we sit in this off season, the middle of the transfer portal? What's the thing you're pulling out of last season the most?
It's interesting because when you look at like how the Big Ten fared last year, like they had the most teams in the tournament. Like they were from top to, like, I feel like from top to bottom, they had an argument for being the strongest like conference as far as like just overall competition level. But I think you also saw in the NCAA tournament that like it wasn't as top heavy as like the SEC, for example. Obviously, Juju Watkins going down does not help. Like I would have loved to have seen USC's run as well. But like coming out of that, I feel like all of last year, I felt like USC and UCLA were at the top, and then there were a bunch of really good teams in the middle kind of fighting with each other. And then the tournament played out similarly. So I think coming into this season, who knows what the Juju Watkins timeline looks like. UCLA had exits. I feel like this season doesn't feel quite the same, where it's just USC and UCLA and the rest. So I'm curious kind of how much some of the teams that were fighting below them can kind of reach up into that upper level and then potentially compete for Elite Eight, Final Four, things of that nature.
Well, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun to kind of dive into because it seems like there's still a bit of an arms race, right? For that upper echelon, you kind of start with UCLA, maybe Maryland. We could talk about that in a little bit. But why? I mean, while we're reflecting a little bit on last year, I'm curious who were the biggest surprises positively, and who maybe surprised you on the negative end from this last season of Big Ten women's hoops.
Yeah, I think last year I would say biggest positive surprises. I think I didn't expect Michigan to be that good that quickly. Like I thought they would get there with their freshman trio of Silas Swords, Olivia Olson, and Mila Holloway. Like there was obviously so much potential, but for them to be as good as they were as quickly as they were, and for all of them to stay throughout a year of the transfer portal, like that's huge. So I feel like Michigan is a team I didn't expect to start that strong. I think teams like Washington and Oregon that were like Oregon was at the bottom of the Pac-12 the year before. I didn't expect them to immediately come into the Big Ten and not only compete but make the NCAA tournament. So I think both of those teams overperformed. As far as like an underperformance, I think like when I looked at my rankings, I think I had like Iowa technically was higher in mine, but they had such a strong end of the year. I wouldn't call it an underperformance. And then like I think Wisconsin, I think had a strong start and then really fizzled out. Nebraska lost Natalie Potts, so maybe they underperformed. There wasn't a significant team that like really didn't hit level of expectation, and that's probably not a surprise because so many teams made the NCAA tournament, and that's like the major goal. So I think outside of injury issues, no one really like was terribly under what I expected, but there were certainly teams that did much better than I thought.
Yeah, I think Michigan gets a lot of the headlines of the team that nobody saw coming, but you're right. Oregon and Washington deserve that notice as well. Certainly an Oregon team that really had a tough go of it their last year in the Pac-12, and to bring in a just whole new basketball team. Like I know Peyton Scott was there, but she wasn't on the team in 23-24. And just this whole new semblance of talent from all these different places. And that can go either horribly wrong or it can match up very well, which is what happened. I also think there's a theme here. I don't know if you think this too, Wyatt. We noticed this last year. We were going through the preview episodes about a lot of teams playing more non-conference games at home or at neutral sites and not true road games, because I think the transfer portal puts question marks around what you have. And I think teams are a little bit more hesitant to test themselves early in the season. Did you kind of feel like that might be a trend that continues?
I think that makes a lot of sense, especially with the portal, like you said, with so many entries this year. Like it's just the roster turnover is just gonna be so significant that you want those early games to like if you they can be tests and that can help you down the road, but also like you don't want an early loss that can really hurt your resume. Like I know Washington ended up being a very good team, a team that was better than I anticipated. But I forget which team it was, but there was like I know they lost to a mid-major team early in the year.
It was like one of the Montanas, right?
Yeah, like and that was one that stung on the resume. And when they were a bubble team, it was one that was talked about a lot. They ended up getting in the first four, but that's probably a loss that looking back they shouldn't have had. And I think those type of things happen. I feel like, yes, I think that makes sense. You saw like first game of the season, I think USC almost lost to Ole Miss. And like, I don't think that USC would lose to Ole Miss like later in the year. So I think that those type of things will happen. I love the high like ranked matchups early in the year. I hope that we don't lose those entirely, but I could certainly see teams like shying away from them to try to get their rosters in shape first.
Maryland's one of those that, I mean, they always, under Brenda Freeze, are always playing this ridiculously hard schedule. And I know they sprinkled a game with Texas in January, but their early non-conference schedule for a Brenda Freeze Maryland team was very light. They played at Syracuse and they played home to Duke, and they won both those games. They got off to the big undefeated start. But it was very benign, and I think part of that was a brand new Maryland team. There was a lot of new pieces that had to figure out how to work with each other. They did have a foreign trip, which I think helped them too, but that was one that really stood out to me. I don't think Oregon played a true road game in their entire non-conference schedule, if I'm not mistaken. Like it definitely seems like something that's trending, but I don't want to take away from Oregon and what they did this year. But again, I think that's the strategy is, hey, let's build some confidence early in the year and see what it turns into. On the other side of things, UCLA obviously had a remarkable run. They get to the Final Four. They win the Big Ten tournament championship. I think with the way it ended and the way they got beat by UConn has kind of soured it for some people, but I don't think we should let that happen. Like I think Talia mentioned it on the last episode. Like that was a really, really good season for UCLA, doing things they had never done before. What was your impression of UCLA as they made that run? And now what do you think about where they sit with most of the starters coming back, but a lot of the bench departing?
Really interesting team, like going into next year. But like last year's UCLA team, like I think they deserved being in that one spot for as long as they were. They beat South Carolina by double digits. Like that's a good team. And I think you saw when UConn played South Carolina in the championship game that UConn was a team possessed by the end of the year. Like that team was like Sarah Strong is going to be there for at least 2 more seasons. Like that team is good, and obviously they had Paige and everything. So I think UCLA was still like well deserving of every like accolade they got. Lauren Betts had a great game even despite all of that. They're a team that had like they're really good at sharing the ball around. They weren't incredible at shooting the three. They're really good at like obviously great rebounding team with Betts. I'm curious what they like. They should still be a great team. I think all of their losses are ones they can overcome. But like they did lose, what is it, like five or six players, and they're like not like Arna Salo was a really good freshman. You got Kendall Dudley's on Michigan. Like it's going to be a tough, like just to completely turn it around. But they're bringing in Lauren Betts' sister, who's a number 2 prospect. Like they're bringing in plenty of incoming freshmen. And they have most of their starters back. So I think they're going to be a great team once again. But that lack of depth is like, that was part of the reason they were so good last year. So I'm curious to see how much they can overcome that.
Well, and I kind of want to extrapolate that a little bit too, because if you check out Wyatt's work, and I know we're going to promote it a little bit later, his Substack and everything he writes, he actually put together a top 40 list of individuals. And I was taking a look at it actually before we started this, Wyatt. A lot of that top 40, at least at the beginning of it, a lot of those players are gone. And the top 2 that come back from that top 10, at least, is Lauren Betts, Kiki Rice. It feels like a lot of that top talent still resides with UCLA. But when we talk about that individual talent, how do you see that as a whole grade for the conference? Is it going to dip a little bit, especially with Juju's injury, or where should we be looking there?
Yeah, obviously when you don't have Juju Watkins, depending on what that timeline looks like, she would be the number 1 player coming in, certainly. But I do think that, like looking at the depth of the Big Ten, I think that there's plenty to look forward to, and I think the main like group to look at is those true freshmen that already showed so much potential. The ones we talked about in Michigan, obviously, but then you have Jelani Cambridge, you have Britt Prince at Nebraska. There's like 10 more that I'm probably gonna forget the names of. It was just such a crazy class. Like I imagine with all of these exits that are happening in the transfer portal, like these players are just going to get more opportunity. And from what we've seen, it seems like that's just going to make them like their numbers are just going to go crazy. That's the hope as far as like getting the new top end talent. But I agree, like a lot of those big names and Juju Watkins potentially not being there. Like I'm curious to see who the stars of the conference are next year. But I think there's still like plenty of talent that should be able to show up.
It's going to be interesting because you feel like Lauren Betts is that, because we talked about this a couple episodes ago, like who is going to be the star, not only of Big Ten women's basketball, but nationally, because you've had Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers the last couple of years, and Aaliyah Boston, and some of these players that have really transcended not just their own schools, but around the conference and the country. Lauren Betts feels like the candidate to be the best player in the country. Can she, I don't know if it's like a West Coast thing. We've always had this conversation with the Heisman Trophy with college football. Like it's harder to win it when you're on the West Coast because people just don't have their eyes on your games as much. But Lauren Betts should be the best player in the Big Ten next year, right?
Yes, I would certainly like that would be my wager. Yeah. Unless like one of those freshmen, specifically, I would say Jelani Cambridge has like the highest opportunity to like become one of the best players because they lost Cody McMahon. They lost a lot of pieces. And so if Ohio State's going to stay at their level, it would probably take Jelani Cambridge becoming the superstar I think she can. But Lauren Betts should certainly be like the heavy favorite for conference player of the year in my eyes.
And playing style plays into it too. I think Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers both played with such a flair and pizzazz and just outgoing personality that really registered with the crowd and with people watching. Lauren Betts, you can see how much she cares. She gets fired up. She gets into games, but it's not the same when it's just hook shots and layups, So there's something about, and that it's not anything against the forwards. It's just always going to be a guard-driven entertainment product. So somebody like Jelani Cambridge, who has that potential, could be somebody that maybe grabs that spotlight. But I don't know. It just kind of feels like you're right. There is an opportunity for a team, for some players to jump into a bit of an open vacuum in the Big Ten next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at I think someone like Ella Dean at Washington showed a lot of end of season that she was hitting everything. And I really like that Washington team this year. So it's that's a name to look for, I think. Kayleen Smykel was very good in her first year at Maryland. She'll have another year without Cheyenne Sellers there. There's certainly players at guard too that I think, and the Michigan ones I'll say again, like Olivia Olson and Silo Sword certainly showed that potential. So it'll be interesting to see who's able to really make that leap, like you said, with the opportunity available.
Well, and we've talked a little bit about UCLA now, and I think, Wyatt, if we're ballparking it here mid-May, you'd project UCLA to be the top of the Big Ten next season. I'm curious because this has been a discussion with Austin and I, and we even kind of proposed this to Talia as well. Who's your number two? Is it Maryland? Does USC fall enough, maybe with the question mark of Juju Watkins? Who do you like at two? And then from there, I mean, we keep using that word opportunity. There's a lot of opportunities, say 3 through 8 or 9. How do you like that class?
We will obviously hold you to your May 13th prediction.
Of course.
Obviously.
Absolutely. When they change, please yell at me for it. I think right now at 2, I would probably go Maryland with the uncertainty of Juju Watkins. I know that they just lost Gracie Merkel yesterday, which is an odd situation, but they still have Yarden Garzone. They still got Okanamwa from Duke, who I think was maybe one of the best additions in the entire conference. She won ACC tournament player. I think that those are 2 huge gets for them. I'm curious how they deal with their issue inside. It feels like they may now have that, but there's still plenty of names that they could still go and get. And Brenda Fries always figures out a way to figure out that roster. So the pieces that they still have, even though they lose Cheyenne Sellers, I think that team seems the most solid to me. I certainly think outside of that, USC is still going to have a ton of talent. I think Michigan and Michigan State are both teams that are going to be very good. Nebraska hasn't lost a single player to the portal. They're going to get Natalie Potts back, Britt Prince with another year. I think they might have another high prospect that I'm forgetting. There's a lot of I think when I'm looking at Washington's roster, they bring a lot of talent back and they've made some good additions in the portal. It's going to be a crazy battle, I think, just right below, again, with that threshold. And I think some teams will be able to show up as real contenders that we might not know yet, just as they develop and grow as far as talent.
Yeah, I think the Big Ten needs a couple more teams to take that step this year and become at least Sweet 16 type of I know 4 teams hosted, but it almost felt like the back 2. Dalton and I both picked against Ohio State and Maryland in our brackets because it didn't feel like they were going to get. Now Maryland did in one of the coolest tournament games you'll see, but Ohio State just felt like they were trending in the wrong direction, and the ceiling felt so low for them. The Big Ten needs some more teams like in Indiana 2 years ago or an Iowa the last couple of years. Not Iowa's a bad example because they were national title contenders. It doesn't need to be that you're going to be a 1 seed, but a couple 3s. Indiana back in 2022, they were a 3 seed. They weren't going to be winning the national title by any means, but they were a good team, got to host, that kind of thing. I think the Big Ten needs that. I think they need some more top talent because, like you said, they might have been the deepest league, but I think the SEC overshadowed the Big Ten with its top-heavy talent.
Yeah, I would agree. I think their current setup, as far as last season went and how it could go this year, is how it looks. It makes for an incredible Big Ten slate. every game is very entertaining in the middle because there's about a dozen teams that are just going after each other, like one game apart in the standings. But to your point, like it looks worse when only 4 make the Sweet 16. Or as you said, like those, I thought Maryland and Ohio State were not going to host. And then I also picked Ohio State to lose to Tennessee. Like it just felt like the momentum was there. I thought Iowa was going to be the reverse because they were coming in with such momentum out of the Big Ten tournament. But still, I think that some of those teams that were good last year and maybe won a tournament game made the tournament. A lot of them have the opportunity to at least get to like a Sweet 16 level, I think. I'm curious how many of those teams will host. And like, obviously the records aren't going to look as good when they're going against each other, but it feels like a lot of those teams are like in a position to move a notch up, maybe not to a title contender, but to a team that can make that second weekend.
And we talked about some of that class. And look, with 18 teams being in the Big Ten now, it's hard to go team by team by team. So I'll just kind of throw a few at you that we were talking about as part of that class. You mentioned Nebraska not really losing anybody, but losing Markowski.
Yeah.
Trying to fill that void. I'm curious what question marks you might have and what makes you optimistic about them. You brought up Michigan State. I'm curious your questions and optimism for the Spartans. And Washington was the other. Those three that you had mentioned a part of that class. I know there's more, but those three really popped off the page to me.
Yeah, Nebraska losing Markowski is huge. Obviously, she's been a major impact player for all 4 years she was there, and she was starting to become a three-point shooter out of nowhere at the end, which was fun. I like the additions they made. I think like someone like Emily Fisher from Maryland, someone worth giving a chance. They got, I think, Eliza Maupin from Kansas State. Like they're bringing in some good players. I think Britt Prince looked like she could definitely become a star for them. I like Logan Nisley as a piece. They have so many good shooters. I think the big reason I think they can take a leap is because those 5 games of Natalie Potts we got last year looked like she was taking a crazy leap before she had the season-ending injury. Like I think she was shooting some sort of crazy 3-point efficiency. She's not gonna stick with that. But like she had expanded her game. It looked like she was taking the right steps from year 1 to year 2. So I'm hoping that we get her at full strength and she could be at least their next star forward. She's not going to play like Markowski. But the fact that they're not losing anyone through the portal, and they've made some good additions. I think that they're in a position where they look like a very deep team. Michigan State obviously loses Julia Ayrault, who I've always sung the praises for. I will miss her dearly.
You and I both, Wyatt. Yeah. That's a personal favorite of mine.
It's a bummer. I like the additions they made as well. I think getting Jaylen Brown is a huge one as a scorer. They got Rashonda Jones from Purdue, who is someone I thought had a ton of potential. And then I think Grace Van Sluten looked very strong by the end of the season for Michigan State. And I think that from 2 years under Robin Freilich now, I just love how they play. I think that she has such a good system, and it seems like it'll work with whatever the roster is. So I'm big on them. And then the third, Washington. Yes. Washington, they've made 2 additions, and they're both Big Ten additions, Avery Howell and Grabowskaia from Michigan, who I just think are great pieces to add. I thought Avery Howell looked really, really good by the end of the year for USC and is going to get a larger role. And they also only lost really Delia Daniels, who went to WNBA. Ella Dean looked so good by the end of the year. Savia Sellers had a lot of moments. They just feel like they're a cohesive team. They play with an identity, and they've made just like nice little additions to keep it going.
I think those are all teams that I would put in that conversation of you don't have to be a national title contender, but could you compete for hosting? Could the league get even more 5 and 6 seeds, like more teams that have the ability to go on the road and win? I think that was the thing. Like Big Ten got 11 teams or was it 12? 12 teams in the tournament?
12.
Yeah, 12. But it didn't feel like a lot of them had a realistic chance to get out of the first weekend because it was a ton of 8,
7 to 11 seeds.
7s.
Yeah.
Yes.
So can they get some more 3 through 6 seeds that can get out of that first weekend, can be a part of it? Because once you get out of that first weekend, you never know. It becomes neutral site. I mean, we've seen crazier things happen. So I think that's got to be – those teams that you mentioned there have got to be toward the top of teams that could make that step forward. We have touched on it a little bit with the one thing. Obviously, we're only doing the podcast every other week now, so there's several transfer portal things we should touch on. Recent this week is that Gracie Merkel has withdrawn from the portal, which I honestly didn't even know she was still in it because I had it was like over a month ago that she committed to Maryland. So I thought she was out of the portal. She's withdrawn and come back to Penn State. So now Penn State has Mariah Murray and Gracie Merkel coming back, plus the addition of Kaomi McMiller. So all of a sudden there's a foundation there for Caroline Keeger to work with now. And for Maryland, it's an interesting spot because I think that was your big that you're going to build around at your 5 position. So they're going to look different. But I don't know, Wyatt, if you had any reaction to that, any thoughts on that. I mean, I don't think any of us, obviously none of us know the reasoning for it or anything like that, but just an interesting move over a month after she committed to Maryland to just all of a sudden go back to Penn State.
Certainly interesting. I was trying, when I saw that, my first thought was, why? Like, what? I'm confused.
My first thought was, is this a Talia Goodman parody Twitter account? That was my first thought.
Because to me, within the month, I'm surprised it didn't seem like Maryland made any additions that would cause Merkel to have a change of heart. I think Penn State has had a lot of departures. I think that maybe with that in mind, there's a more opportunity for like maybe a significant minutes increase, because even though Merkel's stats were very good last year, I think she only played like 23 minutes. Now that could be just to keep her fresh because she was coming off a major injury as well. But I don't know if it's like, because that's a solid trio of players who I think are like very solid players and something to build around, but they've lost 7 other players. And I don't really know how they're building that back up yet. And Maryland seems like they were in such a spot to like truly compete. Like I thought there was such a well-rounded roster. And I think it still is very good. I thought Merkel added a nice interior scoring and rebounding that they didn't have. So I'm surprised. Like, I'm not sure if we'll ever find out, but it was a move that I don't quite understand at the moment.
It really is interesting though, right? Because I mean, you talk about how high the talent is, but here you got somebody in McMiller who's a creator and a great ball handler.
Yeah.
You got a knockdown shooter in Murray, and you got an elite post player in Merkel. So it feels like there's a path forward with that group, but boy, it's going to have to take the right mesh, right? Like it's got to be the right discipline to let Merkel set up down in the post, to not get ahead of the put the cart before the horse, all those types of things. It feels like there's talent, but it seems like a very one specific exclusive path forward for this group.
Yes. It almost reminded me of when Ashley Owusu randomly went to Penn State. And like that year, it went like pretty well. They just missed the tournament. Like they had their best year, I think, of the Keeger era. But I feel like that team that had McKenna Marisa, it had Shea Chesky, it had Leilani Kapanis. Like it was a well-rounded team. And I guess you're trying to get that with this big 3 a little bit. I'm just curious how else this roster filled out, because again, they've lost so much depth as well.
Yeah, they have. I'm looking at their roster right now, and it's obviously not updated for next year, but they have several freshmen that didn't play a whole lot but are coming back. Like I'm looking at it specifically for, okay, you've got Merkel back, but the strategy with Merkel last year was she would play about 20 to 25 minutes a game. Yeah. So you've got to have a solid big behind her, which they did last year, but do they have that this year? I'm looking at somebody like Ariana Williams, who's going to be a sophomore who didn't play much at all last year, but is 6'2", could be somebody that adds to that. But other than that, it's a pretty small lineup returning of the freshmen who didn't play, who are going to have to take a step forward for Caroline Keeger and Penn State. Other names that I think either have committed since we last talked or we just hadn't touched on yet. The big one is Sarah Williams did announce she is off to UConn. Big pickup there for Gino Auriemma. A big landing spot for Sarah Williams. I'll be honest, I didn't think she was going to go that big, but like Talia talked about on the last show, forwards are at a premium right now. Like you are looking for any really good big you can find, and you pair Sarah Williams up with the shooting that UConn's going to have, a 1-2 punch with Sarah Strong and some of the others. That's a really good addition for them. So she is off to UConn. Either of you guys have any reactions to that one?
I think my initial thought was that her and Sarah Strong is like the perfect front court, because Strong is a great shooter. I mean, Sarah Strong's good at just about everything, but like as now you have like a solid interior rebounder and defender in Sarah Williams. She's so good inside, and Sarah Strong's so versatile. So you can really use her everywhere now, as opposed to having to keep her inside because you have Sarah Williams. And you have AZ Fuds coming back. Like, that team is going to be disgusting again. Like,
Yeah.
That's such a good set of players. I think it makes a ton of sense. Like, if Sarah Williams, like, that's when like Dorka Juhas transferred out of Ohio State. I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Where's she going? And then she went to UConn. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
you have that opportunity, do it.
Yes.
Well, she's been ridiculously productive, right? And ridiculously productive under the circumstance of having 2 or 3 bodies thrown at her at a time, because that's just how defenses in the Big Ten just played Wisconsin. They just threw everything at her. So I'm curious, where she has more opportunities because there's so many other weapons on the floor with her, what now does she look like? Because you expect it to maybe unlock another level in her game. But I'm also curious too, just where Wisconsin was the last couple of seasons. Now she heads to UConn. Maybe it unlocks a little bit of a competitor aspect in Sarah Williams that maybe we haven't seen to the degree that we're about to. And I think that makes you pretty excited if you've watched Sarah Williams the last few years.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's rattle through a couple others that either we haven't mentioned or just did it. Ronnie Porter back to Wisconsin. So there's a building piece for their new staff to try and work with there, with Ronnie Porter coming back. She'll stay in our league. I don't know if we had ever touched on this, but Janiah Barker's off to Tennessee. That feels like a really good fit. Just kind of feels like, gosh, if you watch Janiah Barker play, you're like, yeah, she could be a lady ball. Like that makes a lot of sense. So she's heading there. Just kind of scrolling through to see if there's any others that we maybe hadn't touched on. Ali Kubek's off to Florida State. She was a late addition to the portal out of Maryland and into the ACC.
I'd say that's a big deal now that Merkel has returned.
Yes.
Yeah,
so they lost her and Merkel. You're right.
Yeah.
That's huge. And a couple Hoosiers have found their landing spots. Lexus Barksher to Colorado State, and Hannah Somvik to Wyoming. Really the biggest remaining player to have not decided, really the most impactful left open, is Kaylee Heckel. No destination yet for her. I would imagine that she's one of the more sought after people left in the portal. Talia was talking last episode, like, hey, don't rush it. Make sure you find your right spot. She's certainly not. We're sitting here in mid-May, and we're still waiting on the Kaylee Heckel sweepstakes. But she's kind of the one left out of the Big Ten that you're like, okay, I'm very curious where she's going to go. Weirdly enough, I don't know if you had any thoughts on this, Wyatt. A lot of intra-conference transfers this year. People staying in the conference to go to different schools. A couple of crosstown rivalries with London Jones going to USC from UCLA. Any thoughts? I mean, there's so many portal entries that you got to go somewhere, and there's 18 schools in the league, so it's bound to happen. But it does feel like there's a large number this year.
I think I wrote it down, and this was me doing a head count, but I think it's 13, which it felt like a lot. I mean, maybe they're just doing it for me because that's all I want when someone transfers.
Yeah, we don't want to lose these people.
But I think, like, for a reasoning, besides there being 18 teams, so it's just like percentages, I feel like when you see that, because when there's 18 teams, I wasn't sure what the committee was going to do, like record-wise. Like, are they going to punish Big Ten teams for a lower record? But when a dozen teams make it, and then Minnesota being the one team out that ends up winning their conference tournament anyways, I think you see that, like, there's an opportunity at a lot of Big Ten schools to at least make the NCAA tournament and then make some noise there as well. So maybe when you see a year where a dozen teams make it and then another one wins a conference tournament, like, you see that there is a route for almost every single team in this conference to make it. And I think teams like in Illinois that really was like at the bottom and just found their way up through a new coaching change and some transfers. Like, I think that it shows that there's routes in a lot of these schools, and maybe that is enough incentive for a lot of them to just stay within conference.
I think that's a pretty big testament too to the Big Ten and what it's been here as of late. I wanted to ask a question that I just had a curiosity of to Wyatt because look, when it comes to Big Ten women's basketball, there aren't necessarily a ton of people that cover it to a really well degree, but Wyatt, you're one of them. It's a smaller pool than men's basketball or football when it comes to people covering. A lot of people came through the door when Caitlin Clark, the phenomena, kind of arrived and fans came, but you're a bit of an OG. I was always curious what the motivation, what the history for your passion of Big Ten women's basketball, where it originated from, and why it continues.
Yeah. So out of college, I worked at an Ohio State paper, shout out Buckeye Sports Bulletin, and I was put on the football and the women's basketball beat. And I think I had covered one Ohio State women's basketball game during the Kelsey Mitchell era. But besides that, I was kind of new to everything covering them. And that was the year that they kind of had a bunch of new additions. It was JC Sheldon Dorka, Kirsten Bell. Like it was Madison Green who was still there last year. Like they had a lot of incoming talent. And it was really fun. Like I didn't realize how much I would enjoy covering that team. And so I did that for 2 years. I covered Ohio State. And then when I was starting to leave the journalism world, I still wanted to I really enjoyed covering women's basketball. And I thought like the whole Big Ten was getting interesting. My last year covering Ohio State was, I think, Caitlin Clark's freshman year. So she was certainly like a bit of an inspiration because I was like, wow, she's good. But like Naz Hillman was a huge one. I was in person when she scored 50 points on Ohio State and then lost. But that was a crazy game. And I remember that one. And I just remember like thinking how much talent there was to cover. And like, as you said, there aren't that many people who are covering it. So I wanted to write, I wanted to keep doing something. And it felt like this was the natural progression to start covering Big Ten women's basketball as a whole, see how it goes. And here we are, like 4 years later. So I feel like I kind of hit it like right before it took a major spike with Caitlin Clark. But I was certainly there freshman year being like, wow, I could see the potential.
It kind of sounds like we're similar minded because that was a lot of the basis for the podcast of like, look at how good this conference is. And my thought process was it felt like one player was, and deservedly so, getting the chunk of the spotlight there. And so I thought, what if we have a podcast that talks about said player, but also talks about more than just one? So I think we're similarly minded and like, this is a really, really good conference that deserves to be talked about more than it is. And I think it's exciting that we have this. So how'd you settle on kind of what you're doing now, and how can people check out your stuff, support your stuff? This is your moment. Take as many minutes, hours as you need here to plug your stuff, get people involved.
Yeah, so I do a newsletter called Hoopla. It is currently not posting once a week because I take a break during May as about the off season before the previews start. But it is a free newsletter that is currently on Substack. We'll see for the future, but currently on Substack. It is free to subscribe to, and basically in the off season, I do like lengthy team previews to try to say who left, who's coming in, and what I think of each team. I try to do a power rankings. And then throughout the year, it's just trying to keep up now with 18 teams the best I can, whatever the major storylines are. 3 times a year, I rank the 40 best players in the conference based on where we're at in the season to try to, again, showcase more than a couple players that are getting all the spotlight. Last year, it was a bit of a challenge. I felt like I had to be more I had to back up and zoom out because there were 18 teams to try to figure out. But I'm thinking a second year, I understand the Washington, Oregons of the world a little bit better now. I think you start to get into a rhythm a little bit. So I'm very excited for where this season's going. But yes, I'm at the Hoopla Newsletter. I tweet about it, and I don't remember the blue sky term. I think it's skeet, but I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky at Hoopla Wyatt. I've been having a ton of fun with it. And I think that this conference is just going to keep delivering as far as interesting players and teams go. There's always a team that surprises every year. I didn't expect to enjoy Washington as much as I did last year. There's always some team that pops up that just is a great story. But yeah, feel free to follow along however you'd like.
We'll put your info in the show notes for sure. At Hoopla Wyatt on X. I had never heard the word skeet outside of like skeet. I don't know, like that silly SNL skit that my wife laughs at all the time.
Or what was it? Yin Yang Twins? That's
yeah. I had not heard it in the blue sky terminology yet.
I'm probably wrong too. I just made it up. But.
No, well, even if it's wrong, it's what I'm rolling with from here on out. I will commit to the skeet bit. You mentioned a good little kind of wrapping up note looking ahead. You mentioned what teams surprised you last year. If you had to sit here on May 13th and say, man, nobody's talking about this team, like if you had to try and take a stab at what's going to be the Illinois from a couple of years ago, the Michigan State from 2 years ago, the Michigan, Washington, Oregon from last year, who's that going to be?
All right, I have two predictions. The first one I'll say is Minnesota because they didn't make the tournament last year and they won. I think it was the WBIT.
Yep.
But they did that all without who I believe is their best player, Mara Braun, who has missed the majority of the last 2 seasons with injuries. I'm hoping that she can come back. And they didn't lose much of anyone either. And this group has stayed like rock solid since Dawn Plitzer-White has been there as coach. They have all stayed throughout many portals. They've added some talent again. I think Amaya Battle's a great point guard. I just think they have all of these pieces that have proven like that they can work together. Tori McKinney had a great freshman year. And all they needed was like one major scorer to come in and also add it. And that's Mara Braun, who just happened to be hurt. I feel like they've had all the pieces to be like at least a team battling for the top 25 type deal. And I'm hoping that this year is the first one where they stay fully healthy because I feel like people have just forgot about them because they've been 2 years of being good but not getting to that next level. And the other one is a team that you mentioned as a team that has done it in the past. I feel like people expect Illinois to drop off because of how much they've lost, but they're bringing in another 5-star. They had a 5-star last year in Barry Wallace. I think that they are still going to be a really good team. I like the addition of Maddie Weber from Villanova as another scorer. I believe in Shauna Green always at this point. I don't think Illinois is going away. So I think that those two teams are going to be more like they're going to be in that mix just as they have been.
I think Aaliyah Guyton is
Yes. Yep.
such a good and just perfect pickup for the Shauna Green system.
Well, and you brought up Shauna Green there. You also brought up Dawn Plitzer-White, Wyatt. I think one of the things we haven't talked about so far in these 40 minutes, we've talked about the individuals, we've talked about the great teams, but a lot of these programs have been so successful because the coaching is off the charts. And I'm curious, Wyatt, as somebody who looks at all 18 teams and is evaluating things, the level of coaching in the Big Ten, where you have the national coach of the year in Corey Close, who couldn't even win it for the Big Ten. That was Lindsey Gottlieb at USC. And then you go down the list of some of the coaches that have been making turnarounds. It feels like this is maybe at an all-time type high here.
Yeah, I feel like there's way more teams than not that I love their coach. And I love the style that they're playing in. And I think they're doing the right things to push their team forward. There are very few left in the Big Ten that I feel like might need a change or like are on a hot seat. They certainly are like toward the bottom of the Big Ten. Those exist, but I think getting a Shauna Green, Dawn Plitzer-White for these programs that were kind of sputtering going in, and even Robin Freilich as well before Michigan State went on this run. Like they weren't necessarily like at rock bottom the way Illinois was, but they weren't making tournaments and they weren't winning games. And I feel like you see these increases like on a lot of these hires. I think Jen Jensen had a great first year. That's a little bit different. She was on staff forever, but I thought she did a good job kind of switching over, transitioning from Lisa Bluter. I feel like there's so many good coaches. I've mentioned Kim Barnes-Rico earlier, Brenda Fries. Like the list feels like it's endless at this point. I agree. Like I think they all have their own specific styles that work, but like there's a lot of good talent, but the coaching has been really impressive.
A lot of good recent hires with the Green and Plitzer-White and Freilich and Jansen. Don't forget about the people who have been here for a long time, which is Brenda Fries, which is Kevin McGuff, which is Terry Moore, which is Amy Williams at Nebraska. Like they have been around the block and Kim Barnes-Rico, you mentioned. Like these are I think we talk about, and it's just how things work. You bring in the big new hot names that are the winners and they win right away. But don't forget about the people who have established themselves in this conference for a very long time. I'm waiting for somebody to actually, I'm not. You know what? Nobody mentioned Indiana ever. And that will be perfect because then they can know that nobody's talking about them and they'll surprise somebody because Terry Morin's still the head coach. But
we're trying to fuel them.
What's that?
We're trying to fuel them by not bringing up Terry Morin.
A little reverse engineering here. Anybody in the portal that you liked coming out of a other conference that has joined the Big Ten now that you're excited about what they could do? I know you mentioned Maddie Weber at Illinois. I think that's a really good one. Anybody else just off the top of your head that strikes you?
Off the top of my head, I think Tiana Todd on Ohio State made a lot of sense. I think that's a good get for them to add to the scoring. That I feel like they needed to get someone to replace. They've lost Cody McMahon, they've lost Taylor Theory. Like they're gonna need some. I like that addition. Cara Dunn, I think, came over from Georgia Tech to USC, and they need like not only stopgaps, but they also, when they had Juju Watkins, still needed scoring. They still needed alternative shooting, especially if you're losing Howell and Heckle. I think that's a great get for now and for whenever Juju Watkins comes back. I feel like there's always going to be like names that I forget as far as like non-conference switching. Yeah. Indiana brought in like 7 names that I like.
I can't even keep track of everybody Indiana's brought in at this point.
I think like Chit Chat Wright, I think, is who Iowa got to kind of replace Aaliyah Guyton as far as like an upcoming freshman guard. I think she's an interesting one. There's going to be ones that I feel like I always underrate as well and pop up out of nowhere. Gift Uchenna is one that Wisconsin got. I've been impressed with some of the Wisconsin additions after kind of a rough start to the portal, and a coach that felt like it was potentially a little bit underwhelming as far as a new hire. But I think that they've made some interesting additions to the portal to kind of, and they brought Ronnie Porter back as well. So for now, I think those are kind of the names that stand out, but there's always going to be a name that pops up out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's who's the Michigan girl that they got from Belmont? Or Bucknell.
Bucknell, Sopelkanic, I think.
I think that's a huge one for a team that felt like the only puzzle piece they were missing last year was a big, and they went out and got a really good mid-major big. So I like that one. Sorry, Dalton, go ahead.
No. I was just going to segue over to with the WNBA season starting up. And, of course, Wyatt's got a lot of passion with these Big Ten members and had, 7, I believe, drafted this year. I think 7's right. But some have already been waived. And, of course, the business is so cutthroat in the WNBA. But curious about the Big Ten outlook for the WNBA this season and where your feelings are on that.
Yeah, I think Kiki Iriofen's obviously the easy one to watch because she's not only the highest picked of the group, but she's also on a Washington Mystics team that's going to need her to like make an impact. And I think she's going to be one that you're going to see get a lot of minutes and hopefully have that. I think Lucy Olson also should, I believe, make the roster. I haven't seen for sure. You never know. As an Atlanta Dream fan, I know that they've been excited about Taylor Theory, and it seems like she's going to make the roster as a 3rd-round pick, which is hard to do in the WNBA. So I'm certainly excited for her. But yeah, I was bummed to see Deja Kelly got cut because I thought she had a really strong preseason. I was hoping she would sneak in. Mackenzie Holmes as well devastated me. I know she's not a rookie per se, but she didn't play all last year. I don't know. I'm curious. I think like in a year or two, I like JC Sheldon at Connecticut. I think she might have a really strong second season. And then I'm hoping Cheyenne Sellers still gets another opportunity. I know that she just got waived from the Dream as well, but I was surprised how far she fell in the draft. I'm hoping that she'll find a way onto a roster and get another opportunity because even if she's had a rough like preseason, we saw the talent. Like I know that there's a player in there that can make the WNBA. So I'm hoping that she still has another route.
Yeah, Cheyenne and Deja felt like 2 that I was like, oh, they're going to work. And I'm surprised that so quickly they did not work. But that doesn't mean it's over. They could go overseas, come back, get on another team. I got to give Grace Berger. She's not new to the WNBA, but new team this year. So I'm hopeful we will see her be a little bit more impactful. Yeah, Brett, we hope. We can only hope she gets to play.
The Lynx is a tough one because they have so many good players. I'm curious, but Grace Berger is a WNBA player. Like I feel like she's good enough to get some minutes.
I totally agree. She's been locked up with the fever the last couple of years, so hopefully she'll get some PT there. But we've got a lot of really good good Big Ten players. Obviously, Lauren Betts is going to be the one that people are going to talk about for next year. Anybody else popping off for you as like a potential future WNBA player?
For next season, I'm trying to think, because I do think a lot of those freshmen that were so good last year eventually will. I think someone like a Kayleen Smeichel and I think a Yarden Garzone in Maryland, I think those two will be ones to look at for sure. Ella Dean's shooting, to me, told me that she could be a WNBA player. We'll see. I think Grace Van Slooten could be as well. Like, it's hard to tell sometimes. I think a player could be in the WNBA and then they aren't talked about at all as a prospect. So I don't know for sure, but those would be the names that when I'm looking at like potential ones. And Hannah Stolke, if she has a stronger senior year, I think. She didn't have a down year last year, but maybe didn't reach the heights I thought she was going to. But with no Lucy Olson there might be a stronger opportunity to kind of become the primary focus of that offense. So I think there's certainly players in there. And then there's a lot of UCLA players as well, like Gabriela Jaquez or a Kiki Rice as well, that I'm certain that will get talked about.
I feel like they were high on Dugalich before the season. If she could have a big year coming up, Kurt certainly could be somebody as well. Well, I think we've touched on literally everything in the Big Ten women's basketball span. Anything else, Dalton, that we need to grill Wyatt on here while we have him?
We'll just have to get his hottest takes, ask for him now, and then just hold him to the fire when it comes around to November. I think that's the final play.
What's your hottest take for the 25-26 season? On the spot, May 13th.
All right. Washington to the Elite Eight.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I like that.
I'm going all in on the Huskies for no reason.
Very nice.
So much of that depends on draw, obviously.
Yes,
that's 10 months away.
No,
But
book
I love it. Because I wasn't going to let you get away with Minnesota being the up-and-coming team. Because,
He's too easy.
Yeah, we all know that they could absolutely do that. Washington to the Elite Eight is plenty hot. That's it's not quite ghost pepper, but it's up there for sure.
Hi, Ann.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, Wyatt, we really appreciate you stopping by again. One more time, plug your stuff here before we go.
Yes, the Hoopla Newsletter for now on Substack, and then at Hoopla Wyatt on Twitter /X or Blue Sky.
Wonderful. We appreciate you stopping by. We'll certainly try and have you on throughout the season coming up here. But a wonderful conversation. It's always fun to find other people who are into and covering Big Ten women's basketball the way that we are here. So we appreciate you offering us as broadcasters some content to read as we go through our seasons. And I am 100% positive I will be using your preview content to help us as we get ready for our preview pods as well. So we appreciate everything that you put out there for us with Big Ten women's basketball. A reminder to the folks at home, we are back every 2 weeks here. July 1st. Season. Episode 50 in 2 weeks. I promise you're going to want to watch it. We're excited for that one. Thanks to Wyatt for coming on. For Dalton Shetler, I'm Austin Render. This has been the Dribble Drive Podcast.